Okay. Let's start here as it relates to Chapter 8 with economic growth and some of the rules that come along with that. With economic growth, we are literally using real GDP. You have calculated GDP, nominal GDP, and we understand the difference between nominal and real, and that is for price level adjustments. As I said on Monday, what we paid for a loaf of bread 20 years ago is not what we pay today. So we have to adjust for price level changes as we look at inflation rates. So economic growth, looking at real GDP per capita. What does per capita mean? Somebody tell me.
Per person.
Per person, right? And we understand that you can look at an economic system per capita and it gives you a clear picture. Even though it's an average and it's skewed per person, it's giving you the bigger picture of how that economy as a whole is doing per person. Well, what we try to do in looking at economic growth is also engage some estimation and forecasting. What we need to be able to do is we need to forecast, and looking forward is with what we have in our economy, how much is it going to require us in regards to a time period to double the GDP. Now, I'm looking at real GDP per capita. Why do I need to know this rule of 70? Why do I need to know how long it's going to take me to double my GDP? Why is that a part of this calculation? Why do you think that's a part of this economic growth review? Pause, 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 pause. Why do you think this is important?
For growth.
Pardon?
For growth.
Growth of what? Yeah, it's the economy, of course, but again, what are we looking at? We're looking at real GDP per person, per capita. So when we forecast looking forward, we're looking at what is our population growth going to be? And how are we going to be able to cover that type of population moving forward? So forecasting, we're looking at that real GDP per capita as it relates to the number of years required to double that GDP. Because we have to look at our population growth. Now, in the United States, we understand, population changes are something that we study. The average family has 2.1 children. I don't know where the 0.1 comes in. But, that's very different from years past. And we'll get to this a little bit later in the course, when we look at economic theory and economic growth, one of the philosophers of economic growth from the 1700s, Thomas Malthus, basically indicated that economic growth was not good for our economy. That if our standard of living increases, the number of children that the average household would have would also increase. Therefore, we would have this population problem where we would have all these people that we would need to take care of in our economy. And that's not a good thing. However, what happened was, as our standard of living started to increase, people started to have less children. As I told you, my parents were born during the Depression. I grew up with households and extended family like huge. My father had 8 brothers and sisters. Each of them had like 2 or 3, 4, 5 kids. And my mother had 4 sisters. And it's something, because I don't know about you, this is a little personal, but we use, family gatherings. My family is really big into cards, playing cards. And it was like everybody they didn't have big, huge houses. They had small houses. And it was just like everybody, kids running around, food, and that's just what we did. And it was natural. And in talking to my mother, she said, during the Depression, families had an average of 5 kids. But as standards of living has increased, the number of children per family has decreased. I have plenty of friends, professional, educated, doing very, very well. 1 child. 1 child. And so therefore, we're looking at this in regards to growth. Is growth good? Is growth bad? It has definitely impacted how we live day to day. So this rule of 70, it's basically taking the number 70 divided by the average percentage rate of growth. Okay? Now, let me go to the next slide. All right. So when we take a look at growth in the U.S., the real GDP from 1950 to 2012. Now, let's do a little history. 1950, what's going on in the United States? No, 1950. 1950, what's happening in 1950? That's the depression. No.
I was going to say the Korean War.
Yes. Thank you very much. All right. So we're in the midst of the Korean War, so you get 2 points for the day. But it is also, we're getting ready to go into that conflict, but it's also the end of World War II. And we are 4 years into the baby boom. All right, so we're having kids, right? But the other thing is when Johnny came home from war and, everybody with him, the change in what United States was manufacturing went into convenience for the home. Not so much Monroe County, but in the Lehigh Valley, there are major home developments that were from the 1950s. Small little bungalow cottages, all brick. But these were built at the end of World War II, because what we were experiencing, please write this down because I use this as extra credit, is that we were experiencing a housing shortage at the end of World War II. 1947, when everybody came back home, there was not enough housing for the vets that came home that were getting married and having kids, gazoo. Out of the gazoo, they were having all these kids. But at the same time, we were having a housing shortage. So manufacturing actually kind of shifted to be able to produce things that were convenient for the home. So this is where like automatic dishwashers were going to be, installed in homes. Automatic washers. When I was a little girl, my mother kept for a very, very, very long time a wringer washer. I don't know if any of your grandmothers ever had a wringer washer where they used to do clothes literally by hand, and the clothes, to get the water out, they would feed the clothing through 2 kind of wheels that would squeeze out the water. But automatic washing machines and drying machines and conveniences of microwave ovens, the possibility of those kinds of things coming into households is what was happening in 1950. So we had an increase of growth of 6-fold, all right? So what we're saying here is that, basically our real GDP per person, 3.1% per year. From 1950 to 51, 52, I mean major, major growth in our economy. As a result, as I said, we had all of these improved products, these services for the household, added leisure. Again, we were going into the Korean conflict, but the war to end all wars was World War II. And, coming out of that, we were looking at the home front. Now we're looking at convenience for home. Yes?
Is that when they built Levittown, where all the houses look alike?
Yeah, and that's where you find those developments. I'll date myself, but you guys ever remember seeing a movie, I guess it's a classic, of Michael J. Fox, Back to the Future? Yeah. I'm talking about the first one, not 2, 3, and 4. I'm talking about the very, very first one, Back to the Future, right? And Back to the Future, when he goes back in time, it's in the 50s. And the housing area that he lived in. Literally at that point, if you remember the scene in the film, it was basically just flat land. Those little housing developments hadn't been built yet, but they were getting ready. There was a sign for the future site of, meaning the housing development was going to be built. And again, and that film at that point was in the 1950s because we had major housing shortage. In places like Manhattan and Brooklyn, the beautiful brownstones, which I totally love, you know, the 3-4 story brownstones, when the end of the World War II occurred, basically that's when those single homes were then converted into apartments, because we were then having 4 families live in rather than one particular brownstone. Now if you buy a brownstone, like in, well, Brooklyn Heights, you're going to pay about $6 million. If it's a renovated brownstone. If you want one level of a brownstone, that's about $2 million. Because now what has happened is the resurgence back into urban life is where these brownstones have been completely renovated. They're absolutely gorgeous, but you know, they're millions of dollars. But we had a housing shortage, so that's what was happening there. The other thing I want you to be mindful of when we come to, and we've talked about this before, and that is in regards to economic growth, is, I should be able to do this, is our PPF curve. And we looked at this before. So, you know, whatever variable I'm looking at. If I'm looking at economic growth, you know, basically what's going to take me there is technology. And in the early 1950s, technology, which today might seem real simple, but it was still technology. I'm talking about things like, and I'll date myself, but I remember in my grandmother's house and in our house when I was a real little kid, before the days of ice machines, where we would have ice trays in the freezer. We had ice trays, almost like this DocuCam, where it had a handle, and you would pull up the handle to break the ice, to actually make the cubes. I'm talking simple things like that, but they were still, you know, conveniences for the home. And economic growth was going to be definitely pushed out with technology, and that's what was happening there. All right? So, again, very, very important in regards to that time period and population. Now, what I want you to do, and let me clear this. I'm going to go over this, and then I'm going to have a little table thing that I want you guys to do. So, economic growth. We're supposed to have more time for leisure, right? Social change, democracy, and our lifespan has changed. People are living longer. Now, there's a question we have to ask ourselves with economic growth. And, you know, I looked at that as it relates to my own personal family, and that is the quality of life. You know, we are living longer, but we're using a lot more medication. And the, you know, medication is very, very expensive. So, you know, we have to see, you know, as we grow and as things continue to move forward, you know, what does that mean for the human life? You guys have heard, like, the 40 is the new 20, right? So the 50 is the new 30, the 60 is the new 40, that kind of thing. So, and that definitely is the case. I do have relatives that are in their 90s. My grandfather lived to be 99. I have aunts, this is a little scary, that are 86 years old and still driving. Like I said, it's a little scary. My grandfather was born in Massachusetts, so Cape Cod is where we go to vacation a lot. But I have an aunt that still lives there, has her own car, and she's like the little old lady that can barely see over the dashboard, but still driving. But we're living longer. But it also looks at how things have changed in the household. So what I want you to do now is I want you to look in your book, and this chapter is really basically theory. We'll have one little problem that we'll do, but basically theory. And I want you to get out a piece of paper, put your name on it, And I might need to shift you guys around here. Turn to page 183. Page 183. And I'm going to go over, I want you to take a minute, read the Consider This, and that is Women, the Labor Force, and Economic Growth, page 183. Okay, after you're done reading this, consider this. How many of you grew up in a household where your mother, worked outside the home? Okay. How many grew up in a household where maybe mom was home? Okay, you're the minority. That's all right. I need you guys to kind of move over here. Let's move you because I have more chairs here. I want you guys to move to this side of the room and create a group. Okay, so Katie, Stacey Ann, why don't you come on over here? And who had mothers working? Okay, so we have about 3 groups here. So Bernice, why don't you join them? Katie's going to come up here. I want you guys, I need probably about somebody from this table, from the back table, to come up here. Okay, I need you to move over there. Okay, I need you to move back here. Shannon, you're going to move back there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, on that piece of paper, and, I'll give you my story, just so that you can kind of understand. You know what? Why don't you join them here, because they already have 5. And it'll be 5, 4, 4, 4. Now, for those of you that had mother at home, I want you to take a look at and discuss what it was like for you to have a mother at home, the pros of it, the cons of it. Now, I had a mother that worked. My mother was an RN. So I grew up in a household where, we had like bottles of Santa White shoe polish constantly in our home, because my mother was an RN from the era where a nurse wore white shoes, white stockings, a white uniform, her nursing pins, her white cap with the black ribbon. And my mother was very proud to be a nurse. And towards, the end of her life, when she was getting ill and had to go to the hospital, I think she probably gave the nurses kind of a hard time, because she felt that you can't even tell the nurses from the doctors. Look what they have, scrubs on, they had little clogs. She was, fit to be tied. That, that nurses should look professional and look like a nurse. So I grew up in a household with a mother who was a nurse. My dad worked in a printing company and was a computer operator in the beginning stages of printing, from the old technology of printing to actually doing some things on lighted graph boards. So both of my parents worked. I'm the youngest of 3, and it made a difference in my household. So for those of you that had mother at work, I want you to write down and talk about at your table what were some of the pros and some of the cons of having mother at work. All right?
So are we writing individual papers or statements?
All right. So if women were taken out of the workforce, what does that mean? Let's see. So if women were out of the workforce, what does that mean in women's contribution to what we know as our factor of production? You know, we have land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, innovation, you know, technology and information. If women are a part of the labor force, which is what is listed here, and consider this, what does that mean and what the contributions are to our overall economy? So what this article or this portion of your book is saying, that women contributing to the overall productivity, the GDP of our economy, and basically aiding in economic growth. Because when we're looking at a factor of production, we're basically looking at labor, and we're looking at skills, abilities, and aptitudes. So just because of a gender, if we have women who are not in the workforce, you know, we might be missing out on skills, abilities, and aptitudes that will move our economy forward. And if they're not engaged in the labor force, we're missing out. In microeconomics, you will look at the taste of discrimination model. And what that looks at, what that reviews is when we discriminate based upon backgrounds and ethnicities, what does that do to hurt your economic system? Because you don't know the skills, abilities, and aptitudes that people possess. And if they are taken out of the factor of production, you're literally cutting yourself off at the knees. Same thing with women in the workforce. So as women progress in the workforce, the skills, abilities, and what that means to our economy for economic growth. Okay? All right, so now here's a question that we have to kind of look at. Is growth, and as we look at these higher rates of standard of living, is growth really good for us? Some that are considered, and I'll put this up in a minute, when they look at economic growth, you know, do we really have an increase in leisure time? With all the technology, and do you guys have more time?
No.
Okay, why no?
Okay, I go to school, that's about 3 times a week. Then I have to go to work, that's another 3 times a week. And then I have homework to do, which is another time. I really don't have time to do anything. I don't even have time to watch TV. I haven't turned on my TV since I started school.
Okay, all right. And even though we have all the conveniences of technology to make life easier, why else?
A lot of the time you have to pay for that technology. So you
Okay.
have to work more to pay.
So if you got the iPhone 6, Bernie, you know, you've got to pay for, you know, that technology, right? Okay, all right. So, but what we're saying here is that, well, economic growth should make, you know, life a lot easier. It should give us more leisure time. But in essence, that is not always the case. That's not always the case. So, you know, are we having a better standard of living? In my online class, I asked them this question around this particular chapter. Do you have a higher standard of living than your grandparents?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, but with that higher standard of living, there's some opportunity costs that you're paying. There's some things you're foregoing. So you're not sitting on the porch and, you know, swinging on a swing and drinking lemonade and just kind of chilling and, you know, just having downtime. Our days, as you were saying, are power-packed. From the time we get up to the time we lay down, and even while we are sleeping, we are still accessible. Yes.
Do you mean like a standard of living, like enjoying life, or more of getting stuff done in life? Like,
Well, I think both kind of combination. When we look at standard of living, we always look at material possessions and wealth, accumulation of wealth. We have more of that, but along with that came some other additives and responsibilities to maintain that. Sonny, you had a comment?
Mind frame as Shelby, she beat me to that question, because I wanted to ask, when you said that, it jumped in my head. I was like, wait a second, because I remember back home how things were there in comparison to here, and we didn't have much either, but it seemed like we were more happier.
Okay.
I'm saying, yeah, like, now you
We didn't have much, but we had love,
Yeah,
and we were happier,
Yep.
right? I remember looking at a picture when I was little, and it was a holiday time,
Yep.
and I looked at the living room, and there was just like a little plastic Yule log with some fake little holly on the table in the middle of the coffee table. And I remember saying to my mom, I was like, Mom, Dad, we weren't that poor, were we? She said, you know, little tree, you know. But she said she ran her household where this is the day and age where people used to come and visit. And you didn't have to make an appointment to come to people's houses. You just knocked, came in, your kids came in, and she didn't want anything that people felt uncomfortable, like bringing their kids. They could run around. There wasn't anything to knock over. You know, 2 end tables, 2 lamps. That's it. And so, you know, she always wanted people to feel welcome to bring their children. Now, and it was so funny because I had a gathering at my home with some women, and one of the women commented that, you know, we have big homes and they're lovely and they're show places and for some of us, but let somebody knock on your door. Let somebody ring your doorbell without you knowing 2 weeks ahead of time that they were going to come. And it'll be like, oh my goodness, you know, why are they here kind of thing. When a day and age, you know, when I was little, people just used to drop in. Bernie, you had a comment.
Quick question. Now, I don't know if because you can look at it the other way around as far as, you know, what they said, we work more now, but like everything is kind of handed to us, like you were saying before. You know, before it used to be like a competition for the paper route, you know, to the person that delivers your paper to your door, or the milkman that comes to your door, you know. So now I feel like everything is handed to us a little bit. So how do we work more? You know, like that's what you guys were saying. We kind
Yeah,
of
I'm
more
curious
now with the-
too. Because
You get what I'm
in a
saying?
sense, we're
I
not.
feel like
because
they used to work harder.
back in the day, before all this technology, before assembly lines and all that, it would take the person weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to build a car. Now they can build it like 20 cars in a day.
Right.
So I don't understand
So that's
like
right.
how we don't have increased leisure time, how we work more.
And
Because we're
it
not.
is. And when we look at, we have less leisure time. I mean, we have all these conveniences, yes, but we have less. I think it is, I guess, looking at the growth of the economy with technology, we're doing more things. Let me kind of give you an example, and I hear what you're saying. You know, when you go to the grocery store, I'm a Giant shopper. So, you know, I swipe my Giant card. And, you know, all of us have gone through the self-checkout. And, you know, there was a day, and I'll date myself, where every product in the grocery store had a price tag on it. And so there were people who all their job was, a part of their job, a big part of their job, was when the price of a can of peas changed, they would have to scrape off the little price tag and then put another price tag on. That sounds so archaic, but that is the way it worked. Then you had people, you had like, you know, all of the aisles were open, not just 2 or 3. But now, you know, we have our own self-checkout. You know, people used to bag your groceries for you. I'm bagging my own groceries. I'm scanning my own groceries, and I'm like, wait a minute. You know, when I go down to, when I go into the city, there used to be people in booths. Now I'm getting my own Metro card. And, you know, I'm like, whoa, where's everybody at? you know, and we've actually had a decrease in jobs, and we've made it to where we're doing more with this decrease in jobs, but it's making it easier for people to get through the process of, you know, grocery shopping, because I can do it myself, they can do it yourself, and get in and out. So we're supposed to be saving time, we're decreasing jobs, but individually, I'm doing more. Yeah, I'm doing more. I mean, I'm scanning my card, I'm scanning each, you know, item I'm purchasing, I'm putting it in a bag. I don't have anybody putting it in a bag and putting it in my... Oh, yeah. That's not happening.
I was looking at it from the workers.
Oh, yeah, and I'm just talking about, like, overall. So we have all these conveniences, but our lifestyle has changed. Sonny?
Yeah.
Professor, for argument's sake, just put it in a nutshell, as far as happiness goes, right, you're going back to the word happiness,
Mm-hmm.
and I've traveled some places, I've seen the other side of that coin, so to speak, in comparison to the modern society that we live in here as we know it, and you go someplace else that's totally opposite, and you will see that they have nothing, but yet they're more happy. And for argument's sake, I've met a man, 76 years old, said, "Hey, I just had a baby." Put that in a nutshell, happiness in a man's point of view. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's true.
He
It
wins,
seems like
Yeah.
seems like the third world countries are they're happier.
Yeah. 'Cause I'm
Not
from
that
the third world, yeah.
they have less,
Because they don't
but
have
they're
to.
happier.
Yeah,
You know, they have technology because.
but they're happier.
Right, but they're happier. It's not as fast as ours may go, and it's not as quick, but they're just happier.
Yeah, we have evolved.
And the lifestyle is a little more, even if you go on vacation, like I went to the Bahamas, and everything is slow paced, and you know, you find yourself like moving quickly, and you're like, wait a minute, why am I going so quickly? I'm not in America anymore, I can slow down, you know, kind of thing. But just happier doing it slower for some reason. And then we get here, everybody's like, we're Spanish to each other, you can't even say hi to each other because you're like going. And you know, you lose the time thinking, you lose everything.
I lived in Oklahoma for quite a few years, and coming from the Northeast, first of all, as soon as I opened my mouth, they knew I was not from there. And I work for the University of Tulsa. And from their opinion of me is I talk too fast. And everything, you know, like the secretaries and things, like I had to have things like done, and like, what's the rush kind of thing.
Exactly.
And so even just within the country, in just different regions, it's different. Now, I want this in your notes, and this is looking at economic growth from what you guys are talking about, and that is the anti-growth view. Because in the anti-growth view, basically what we are saying, and there are economists that do believe this, that, you know, more stuff does not equal better living. Okay?
Absolutely.
More possessions does not necessarily equate to better life. And so there's this anti-growth where we're looking at not only material possessions, but also what does that mean for our environment. The more things we create, the more things we produce, that means more pollution, more waste. What are we going, and the use of our resources. Even with Pennsylvania in the Marcellus Shale, you know, Pennsylvania and Ohio, where all this natural gas is underneath us, you know, we're looked upon as the golden egg because there's enough gas to, you know, last 100 years. And so, you know, we have to do the fracking to get to it, and some of you might do your research on that and look at a particular company. But what does that mean in regards to the wastewater and, you know, in regards to safety and environmental issues? Yeah, we'll have the gas. Yeah, it'll decrease, you know, some dependency on foreign oil and imports. But what does that mean in the long run? And I'll give you a case in point, just kind of referring back to Oklahoma. They're doing quite a bit of fracking to get the natural gas out there. They have had, over the last year, an increase of like 250 minor earthquakes because of the fracking, and never had that many earthquakes. And because they're taking the gas out, trying to put the water in, and you're removing something that's been there, and then that creates a shifting. And so, you know, we look at this whole anti-growth view.
In regards back to pollution, as far as we have so much stuff, it's like, back home, we reuse a lot of things. So it's less waste being dumped. A lot of things in America is like, everything is like, oh, it's, you know, disposable. Everything is disposable. Just throw it, they make it easier to, you know, and then it's easier, yeah, in the households, but then it produces the other problem of the whole pollution with everything being dumped and where to put it, kind of thing. So yeah, as you said, the more equals better thing. I don't think it's like, just look at how much garbage we use a day. I take out my garbage like twice a day. If I'm home on the weekend, it's like, oh my God, why is this garbage filling up so quickly? Because everything is just like, dump it, use it, dump it, use it, you know?
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing.
And we have to look at that. All right, lastly, before we finish class, I want you in your book to turn to page 184. I got to mention this, and then we can just look at the problem. It's real easy to go through. Figure 8.4, changes in educational attainment, U.S. Adult population. This is very important because when we look at where we were in 1960 versus 2012, we have more high school graduates, we have an increase in college graduates. All looks well. We understand that our income potential is directly correlated to our educational attainment. You know, when we look in years past, to get a college education was great, but coming out of high school, you could get a job that you could build a house, buy a house, and send your kids to college with. That is no longer the case in the day and age in which we live. You have to have at least 2 years of some type of training or education beyond high school, because a high school diploma alone won't do it. But if you take a look back in, you know, decades past, this goes from 1960, we had high school graduates that were able to get decent paying jobs. That's not the case. So we have more pressure on higher education, which makes higher education more expensive, right? And we all know this, right? And so it's not as accessible. And then we have more student loans and more debt accumulated because we're going after the education. We need the education to get the better paying job, because we've moved from that manufacturing, you know, hub. Not that we don't have manufacturing, but we move to services and technology in our economy. So therefore, that requires special training and special education. All right? Now, lastly, turn to page 193. And this is number one. This is just a review question, real easy. As I started with the review of 70, just wanted you to understand basically how this works. So we're trying to calculate, with all these changes in our population, what does that mean in regards to how long is it going to take us to double our GDP. So number one, on page 193, if real GDP grows at 7% per year, the real GDP will double in approximately how many years? So if we're looking at 70, all right? Okay, so I'm page 193, and I'm looking at my rule of 70. Okay, so basically I'm taking 7 divided by my 7%, so I'm looking at 10 years. Everybody understand that? Yeah. Easy enough, all right? But again, calculating how this is going to affect with population. All right, so you'll finish chapter 7 and chapter 8 for your Connect this week. And then next week we'll go into chapters 9 and 10.
So the connecting with chapter 7 is still a group?
No, the group assignment is what you did here in class. Right. I actually removed that from Connect. Just to learn smart and, right, and any quiz.
You want the... Sorry.